I think I've discussed Priya. I'll start off first. I'm Kong. I think most of my batchmate call me Yin, but usually people call me Kong here, which is a bit more straightforward. So Priya has taken the time to prepare a very simple slide. It's very straightforward. Some of some of it is just very simple and for us to catch. And from there, Priya will start off presenting, and intermittently I'll come in and just barge in and contribute a bit of my part of the presentation. So technically, it's not very confusing, but it can sound quite confusing. So hopefully we can make it easier and simpler for you guys. All right, Priya, you want to start off?
I thought you starting off.
Yeah, I think Priya can do the slides and I can come in.
Yeah. So what I believe is let's talk about AMC pathway, because I've been told that anyone who's joining is probably from the housemanship people who have completed the housemanship or are about to start doing housemanship. At the moment, takes in people who have already had registration with working in Malaysia itself. So you have to finish your housemanship, and I don't know the current protocol of how long it takes to get your general registration done in Malaysia before Australian government hires you to work with them. But so the first requirement is having general registration with Malaysian government, and the second requirement is sitting for Part 1 AMC. So the Part 1 AMC has an MCQ part, and that...
I think the slides is Prof dealing with the slides?
Yeah, you have to tell me change. So then
So the picture that's Tasmania, that's Cradle Island, and this is Melbourne.
That's Melbourne, yes.
Yeah. So this is the pathway that you can come, which is the AMC Part 1. Now, to enroll for AMC Part 1, they ask you for your identification verification, and then you need to show which university you come from, which definitely Malacca Manipal is credentialed to be recognized as one of the colleges that they allow for you to sit for AMC Part 1. And you get all the documents verified, send your pictures so you can sit for the exam, because it takes a while before they get back to you and give you a green light to sit for AMC Part 1. So if you finish all that beginning verification and identification, all the questions and forms that they need you to submit, please submit that as soon as possible. Then you can book in your date to sit for AMC Part 1. So next slide.
Yeah, I just want to add a bit there. For the Part 1, I think there's a trick there. You don't have to do, there's no eligibility for Part 1. You can sit it as early as final year of med school. So there was my initial plan before I took it in 2013. I was about to do it in 2009, which I chickened out and didn't do it. But you could do it as early as doing housemanship itself. You don't have to wait till your housemanship ends to do your Part 1. Yeah, Priya, sorry, carry on.
No, it's okay. And you, I can't remember the length of how long it's valid for, but you do not need to sit for it again. There's no expiry date per se if passing Part 1 onwards. So I did mine in 2010.
Yeah.
My Part 1.
And I did mine in 2013, and it was active for a good 7 years.
Next slide, please. So it's a 150 question exam that you have to sit in 3 hours 30 minutes. Now, it's a very wide coverage of knowledge that they test you on: medical, surgical, psychiatry, X-ray interpretation, MRI, CT scans, and you got to know all of them in order to pass the exam. So do as many questions as possible, as the exam costs a lot of money if you are changing your Malaysian currency to sit an Australian exam. So do not sit until and unless you are prepared for the exam.
Yeah. So usually part 1, I think majority of the people who take part 1 would pass part 1. And I think once you finish part 1, that's the hard part, really. Part 1 is the easy part.
Yes, I agree. Part 1 is the easy part, but please don't go unprepared, because I know a lot of people will be working while studying for the exam, but sit for the exam only when you have already prepared for yourself, because it costs a lot of money. So the next slide, please.
Changed already.
So these are the books you can use to study. There is this photocopy versions that's available in Kamal Bookstore.
Good old Kamal Bookstore.
Yes, and you can books from them. Now these books are so old. Like when I sat for them, this was the same books, and the current requirement also says to study from these books.
It's still the same book.
Yeah, it gives you a rough idea of what can come out for the exam. So if you look through, you won't be like having a shock when you sit for the exam, because it's exactly the same kind of way how the questions are going to be framed and asked. There's some online web page also that's available at the moment for AMC Part 1 that you can pay like 3 month annual registration and do the questions online to see whether you'll pass the real exam or not. Yep. So when I sat for my exam, the requirement was only for 3 years to be practicing in Malaysia, and we get our general registration after 2 years housemanship. And 1 year of working in Malaysia, we get our general registration. But I no longer think it's valid at the moment. I don't know how many years it takes to get general registration in Malaysia at the moment. But Australia is very particular with having general registration in your own country before you migrate to a different country.
Yeah. So if you do not have your general registration in Malaysia, that is probably the first thing you need to get. Even if you pass your part 1 without any registration, no one's gonna care, because they will assume that your practice is not accredited and they will not want it. Yeah, and they will not be interested in you at all.
Even if you are an Australian PR person, if you have your permanent residence in Australia too, you fall in the same category.
Yep. It doesn't matter what citizenship or whatever migration status you have, but this is the requirement for them, because I think a lot of people pass their part 1 and then but do not have registration, but they will never get further than not having registration, because you have people who did not finish internship and finish med school and did not finish internship and went ahead and did an exam thinking that they can apply as an intern in Australia with part 1 doing internship. That's not going to happen. Yeah, you will not get internship in Australia if you're finished part 1 and not an Australian graduate. Yeah. Next slide. All right. I think Priya, you can do that first, and then I'll speak to mine after yours.
So I moved to Australia in 2016, and I got the job first before I made my move. And I worked during the first year. During that time, I sat for AMC clinical exam, which I can tell you is really difficult. It's one of the exams that the failing rate is really high, and you have to clear the exam for you to get your general registration if you choose this pathway. So during that exam, there's 20 stations. Each station has 3 to 4 sub-questions underneath them. All of the questions has to be answered in 8 minutes. Now, it includes taking history, examination, including all the subtopics like obs and gynae, ENT, mental health. And you have to use the Australian method of questioning, their type of history taking and their method of examination, which I would say is close to what we learn too, but they're very organized in their way, and we've got to accommodate to that way of answering the questions when you sit for AMC Clinical. So if you ask me, I personally think that it's very important to work in Australia before you sit for AMC Clinical exam, unless you want to just move and spend a lot of money doing these crash courses to learn the technique. But what helped me more was like working in Australia to know how they do it here before I sat for the exam. And of course, cost itself was a lot more expensive. But because I was earning money here, so it was a lot easier for me to sit the exam while I was here. Whereas Kong decided to do another pathway. So you can either come with the AMC Clinical exam, which is a tough course, but once you pass it, you have to work like in multiple different departments over a duration of 1 year, and you get your general registration, which literally is like a green card to work in any part of Australia in any field that you want in the medical line.
Yeah, I think a lot of people who are interested to come to Australia would think that you can only get a job in Australia if you have clinical exam passed. That's actually not true. We came here without clinical exam. We both came here with our part 1, managed to get a job after applying many hospitals, and then managed to eventually secure a job. Only then we attended our clinical exam, because like Priya said, it's important for you to know the system here for you to pass the exam, because they are quite particular in quite a few things. Unfortunately, it's not easy. I would say it's a very hard exam. So I took it a few times, spent some money. And
It is
after
exam. That's how
it's very expensive. It is very traumatic exam because for that I think 3 hours or 3.5 hours, it's very excruciating, and then the passing rate is only 20%. It is very hard, and the exam will cost you how much was it? 3,000.
3,000, yeah.
2,000 Australian dollars. So it's not something that you can just jump on. So I took a different pathway. Like, do you have next slide for it? Actually, Prof. Yeah. So my pathway, what I did, because I could not get through the AMC clinical exam, but I was really working in Australia, so I know the system. I've done my rotations and all that, and so I've decided to do a work-based assessment. So work-based assessment is the only tricky part about work-based assessment is looking for a job in a hospital that has the program. So like for instance, in South Australia, there's only 2 hospitals in South Australia that offers work-based assessment. One is in Mount Gambier, and the other one is in our hospital, which is Lau McEwen. There are also other hospitals. You can actually Google it on AMC website on what are the hospitals that offers work-based assessment. To get into work-based assessment, you need to first, like I said, get a job first, work for at least 6 months, usually 3 to 6 months, and then they offer you the program, and then you join the work-based assessment. Then the work-based assessment would spend about 9 to 12 months. You're technically just working. You're technically just going to your day-to-day rotations and your work, and then you just pick up cases to discuss with a consultant. Well, I can go into detail on how work-based assessment is, but there's like part 1 and part 2. Part 1 is very simple, basic, like cannulations and NG tubes, or probably how to do observations and stuff like that. And part 2 will be more case-based discussion and mini CX and bedside examination. AMC work-based assessment also will cost you money. Yes, you will be working, but you will be paying about 10,000 Australian dollars in total for the whole duration of 9 to 12 months. It doesn't matter how long you take to finish, it will cost you about $10,000. So you can decide which you want, because like how Priya did it with his clinical exam, you take $3,000, you pass it first time, good. If you take multiple times, it might end up being more than $10,000. But work-based assessment is $10,000, passing rate is 95%. It's pretty hard to fail because you're technically just working. it's pretty hard to fail. So far, I've not really seen anyone who failed the exam. But 95% passing rate, just spend more money. It's all about the money. Next slide. So, you want me to continue, Priya?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I continue. So next, once you get your part 2 sorted, and you need to make sure, even if you have your part 2 sorted, you don't necessarily get your general registration. A lot of some people will take a few years off, study for their part 2, and then try and get a job. But taking a few years off will be detrimental in you employed and getting a job, because the Australian requirement for you to get a job is you need to have at least 2 years of practice, recency of practice. So if you do not have 2 years of recency of practice, they will not give you a job. If you go to a GP land, after you finish your part 1 or your part 2 and you're in GP, it's non-accredited work, it's not accredited work because it's non-observed, they will not give you a job. If the reason both of us always got our job, because me and Priya, we've always been in the hospital system. We've never left the hospital system, and we've always been observed and monitored, so it's easier for them to keep track. But once you leave the hospital system and go into GP land, it becomes very complicated, and they do not recognize GP work in Malaysia, no matter what you do. So if you get your, hence, if you finish your part 2, AMC part 2, you need to do your rotation. Meaning it's 1 year rotation, surgical, medical, and emergency. Was it? Yeah, surgical, medical, and emergency. Total of 1 year on top of the part 2 exam. Then they give you registration, which is, like Priya said, your green card. So once you get your green card, then everything becomes super easy. Everything becomes a piece of cake, because you can literally apply for anything under the sun that you want to study, and they'll give it to you based on what you want, but quite easily, considerably easily compared to how Malaysian system runs. Considerably easier. If you go through my pathway, which is AMC work-based assessment, you already have a job. So you are technically in the program, in the workforce already. So once you finish your work-based assessment, you automatically will have a continuation of job. It's a bit different from AMC Part 2, because some people just take a few years off, not work, do AMC Part 2, and then apply for a job. Then they realize they will not get a job because they've not worked for 2 years. I think a lot of people don't realize that bit. Yeah. Priya, have anything to add?
No, nothing. But also, like, if you guys have left the government sector and working in private, doing locums or anything of that kind of manner of work job, what I would suggest is get a short-term contract back to the hospital if you're intending to work you're intending to make a move, and do at least 6 months in a government job, whatever job it is, so they can accreditate you and you can carry that recency of practice document, come in and get a job easily.
They are very particular with their recency of document, because I see a lot of my colleagues who have PR in Australia, and then they will finish their part 1 and then move to Australia with a PR, and then do not work, and then you spend a few years studying for part 2. So even though you have PR, you have part 2, but if not work last 2 years, no one's going to give you a job. And they'll just say you have to do an attachment. Well, you can always do an attachment, which is like a unpaid shadowing kind of a thing, where you go to the hospital and observe and all that. You might get lucky. Someone might just say, oh, you're actually quite good. We can actually offer you a junior job. But that's quite hard as well. Yeah. And you have to really count your blessing if you have that. Yeah, I think that's the basic gist of it. This is probably the last slide, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I don't know whether we've made this simpler or more complicated for you guys. We'll stop talking for a while and see if anyone has any questions to ask us. Thank you, Prof.
Thanks, Priya and Kong. I've got some questions which came to us before as well, but I have also a few things that I want to ask you. And I've just noted down, and I will ask the questions that were shared with me in a while. The first thing, let me just clarify with you. So you're saying that after MBBS, that once
Yeah.
they finish MBBS, they can, after graduation, they can actually go to Australia. They just have to write AMC Part 1 and then get fully registered. Just correct me if I'm wrong. They get fully registered by the KKM, like as in like after 2 years of housemanship, they get the full registration, permanent registration thingy, and then they are ready to move to Australia. Now, when they move to Australia, there are two options. One is to go by AMC Part 2, and the second one is what Kong was mentioning about work-based assessment. This is the gist of the thing that I
Yeah.
got, right?
Yeah, I think the first initial part of it is we don't know what is the current registration program for Malaysian registration. Do you get general registration in Malaysia after internship, or do you have to practice 2 years of MO-ship? Because back in my time, you need to do 2 years of MO-ship as well.
Yeah, recently there's some change of shortening it out. The recent news has come out, so I'll just get back to you on that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because the idea is as long as you get general registration in Malaysia to be able to practice freely, then they're happy. Yeah, because our time it was we need to do 2 years and then 3, which is 5 years in total. Yeah.
Wow. You make it sound very like primitive. Our time. Wow.
Well, that was 2000. That was before 2010.
But one thing I really can see that, in compared to the Asian, like you guys are like so chill, like I mean,
Yeah,
made it a
very
very
chill.
informal
Very
session.
chill.
I really love this aspect, like where you made things very cool. So I have a few questions on that also, which I have which will add on to your the persona that you've created. Just one more thing I just wanted to clarify with you. So you're saying like if a person do not leave the government hospital, that is better, and then they
Yes.
come.
Yes.
All right. And if they have left, what Priya
Yeah.
mentioned, just try to get back to government in some form of clinical attachment, is it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, have to do a clinical job even for 6 months. That's the minimum 6 months, and show them recency of practice in 6 months, and you can get a job then.
Okay. All right. I think there's something like from Nuwan, his question is, do we get paid during the work-based assessment? I think, Kong?
Yes, it is a job. So when you get the work-based assessment, that means you're employed by the hospital. So that's why I said the tricky part is to get the hospital that has the work-based assessment to employ you. Once they employ you, you are the employee, and then you work about 3 to 6 months. Then they know that they feel like, okay, I can keep you as a doctor. You are safe. I just need to watch you. Then I can offer you the program. Then while they offer you the program, you'll be actually working at the same time as well. So you're actually being paid to work and study at the same time.
Okay. Thank you, Kong. I mean, that's only thing you didn't say how much. That one will come later.
We'll come to that later.
So I got a few direct questions, but I think Michelle also asked the question how to become a specialist in Australia, and how long does it take to become a specialist in Australia?
So depending,
Yeah.
If you-
Priya, I mean, why don't you answer that?
based, like we do orthopedics or general surgery, it takes 7 years for you to. So from the minute you get into the training program and you come out, it's about 7 years. For ED, it's like probably about 4.5 years to 5 years. It's quite quick. It's as fast as you can finish it. Medical also, you've got the normal general physician qualification, but if you subspecialize into rheumatology, endocrine, it's a bit longer. So that's 3 years to finish just the general physician, and another 6 months to be gazetted if you complete everything quickly and come out easily. Now, there's a lot of perks of working in Australia, to be honest with you. Like I said, AMC Part 2, I could claim for the exam back for my professional developmental fee. So even if I paid the 3,000, I claim the whole entire amount back. And for my ASM training to specialize in ED, it's paid for. Like I don't pay a single cent of my own. I paid out first, but I claim everything back. So my education as an ED specializing training is free for me here, technically.
Yeah, it's pretty much free because they give anyone who's employed by the hospital gets an annual education fund, and that is enough to cover for whatever exams you want to sit for, including even when you become studying specialization and all that. So even if you don't get to claim those, the tax will cover for you.
Yeah.
So it is actually pretty good.
Right. I think those are some perks they will learn as they enter the system. They'll get to know the perks of the system as well. Right. We're getting like quite a few questions. I mean, okay. Before I read those questions, let me finish the ones I got directly. Is English exams required to
Oh, yeah.
do
Please sit for your IELTS.
IELTS? Okay,
Yeah.
that's
Unfortunately, yes. And IELTS expires, PTE expires, or English exam expires. So
yes,
you
2
need to make
years.
sure you get everything sorted before your exam expires, because you have to do it again.
Right.
Just before you move to Australia, sit for your IELTS again. Just so that it's a longer
Yeah.
expiry.
Everything expires. Even applying for my personal residency, I have to take exams, English exam. So yes.
Only thing is AMC Part 1 doesn't expire. That's what you said.
Yes. 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 That is the best bit of it.
To be honest with you, it says in the webpage 7 years to expire, part 1. But I said for my part 2 and part 1, 8 years difference. No one questioned that.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah. They're usually
Right.
quite okay with it. Yeah.
If this one question is like, this is with regards to traveling. These two are related question. Someone said, I'll read both the questions. It's a direct question there. Can we come back to Malaysia as a specialist later? Another person has said, can we go to New Zealand with the Australian specialty?
No and yes. So
okay, I mean, you can.
So if you do specialization in Australia, you go back to Malaysia. You can go back to Malaysia as a specialist, but Malaysia laws changes all the time, especially to the ones who are not trained in Australia, trained in Malaysia. So you get a lot of people who do not want to go back because you have to start from pretty much from scratch again if you once you get home to Malaysia, because Malaysian law forces the doctor to stay put a bit longer with gazettement and everything, and then they won't give you registration. So it gets a bit tricky. I'm not so sure about going home because frankly we've never thought about going home. I'm sorry, but
okay, let's
once you get here you don't want to go home, trust me, nobody wants to go home.
How about New Zealand?
And New Zealand, yes. So Australia and New Zealand is pretty much twin sisters.
Okay, great. So I'll just address the questions in the chat. That is, if you do AMC Part 2 or WBA while working there for a year, is another year of supervised work needed for general registration?
I think it's a bit different. So if you do AMC Part 2, you need to do 1 year of generalized supervised work. But if you do work-based assessment, actually no, that's wrong. I would both need supervised rotation for 1 year. Both.
So you had to do yours after your work-based assessment another 1 year, right?
It's because I did mine before I went for WBA. So I already had my rotation ready. But I actually just remembered that my colleague who did not do the registration and went straight to WBA program had to
do
work
after
for
that
another year to get the registration. So regardless, whether you do Part 2 or you do work-based assessment, you need to do 1 year of supervised rotation, which you still get paid.
Okay, actually, I mean, if you guys know that we in our college we have started the workplace-based assessment also, but it's in a formative level. We have done mini CX, DOPS, and multi-source feedback. All those things we have started. So this doesn't sound very Greek and Latin to us, though.
It's good. I think the work-based assessment thing is a new thing now. It's very common nowadays. Yeah.
Okay, moving on. How long does it roughly take to get a placement in hospitals from the time of passing AMC Part 1?
Oh, depending. I passed my Part 1 in 2010. I applied for heaps of jobs, but then again, I had like 7 years experience in orthopedics, so I couldn't get any other job apart from orthopedics, and I didn't want to pursue orthopedics anymore. So I was stuck in getting a job that allowed me to do anything else apart from orthopedics. So it's easy to land a job, but they tie you down to working in that same field as a, I would say, service registrar position. That means you're not in a training program, but you're just servicing in that line. So it depends on, like, if you just want to start fresh new and be in a training program, then it takes a while before you get the job that you want.
Yeah. If you want to just do a basic junior medical officer rotation, there are quite a few jobs available. Once you finish your part 1, and then if you finish your part 1, you have your Malaysian registration, you work for a few years, you got an experience. If you look for those junior medical jobs around in Australia, I did apply for 15 hospitals, but I only got back 1. But you can, it's I wouldn't say it's easy.
The chances are better.
A year or 2 for you to get a job.
Yeah.
The experience, especially government hospital experience.
Very
that's what you
important.
said.
Staying in a hospital setting, for me, because I went to district,
Okay.
so it gave me a bit of a boost going to district. Because here in Australia, going to district is a big thing. It's like if you go to district, it's like, wow, you can do everything under the sun kind of a thing. So being in district gave me a bit of a boost there. So if you've done your all that internship and then you went to district and then you came back in a tertiary hospital, it gives you a very good CV that you can come into a junior post very easily.
Right.
Yeah, but you still take about 1 to 2 years for you to eventually find the hospital, because there are quite a few hospitals out there. They are quite dodgy. I know it's Australia, but it still can get quite dodgy.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, moving on to the next question, because there are quite a few questions coming in now. Once you've started working per se, we choose to work in WBA. Is it compulsory to take part 2 by 10 months of training?
No, it's not a compulsory. If you got a job, you just continue working until you want to get general registration. But you do not get paid like a full doctor until you get your general registration. Your pay is a bit less than the other doctors. And saying that you're not a permanent resident, so you also get taxed a lot more. So you want to get your general registration as fast as possible.
Is that pay good enough to sustain oneself without support from home?
To self.
Yes, you can.
You can have a whole family here, you'll be fine.
Oh, great.
You have a lot of families who move from different countries and like single breadwinner with kids, and they survive fine. Yeah.
Not a problem.
Right. So after, you said after AMC Part 1, if we go to Australia, is it considered an internship in Australia?
No, it's not. Like I said, you will never get internship in Australia. The only way for you to get as internship is when you're Australian graduate, like Monash grads. Monash grads, they can apply for internship straight in Australia without going through the Malaysian system, and they stay in Australia. Here, after part 1, your job that you get is actually a junior doctor. So they have different levels. So they have first start off as RMO or junior medical officer, and then you have senior medical officer, and then they have the registrar. Even in registrar, there's service registrar or training registrars. So, but getting into, so once, if you can get a job after your part 1, after your registration in Australia, your job should be a junior medical officer, which is about 80 grand a year.
Yeah.
About 80 grand a year.
And when you say grand, it's 80,000 Aussie dollars.
Yes,
yeah.
A year.
Right.
But we're not supposed to convert because you're living in Australia. You
True,
pay
true.
that.
Don't convert. Don't convert.
Right. Is there a different pathway for specialists who specialized in another country to work in Australia?
Oh, that's hard. The specialist pathway is very confusing and it's not very nice. I have friends.
Like MRCP is not recognized in Australia. So if you're a consultant who has finished MRCP and you worked and you finished their gazettement, you are still not a consultant in Australia. They're very strict on certain things. But if you're FRCS, then you're recognized. But even with that, you're trained like an advanced trainee until you finish another OSCE exam.
Oh.
So it can be very, Australians are very like stuck in their ways. They need you to sit that exam.
I do have a friend who took MRCPCH, the pediatric paper, and then got so all of these the UK ones, all of them you can apply for specialist recognition. So it's up to the specialist body to see the amount of work that you've done and your excellence in your exams and your performance to decide whether they should actually recognize you. So I actually have a friend who took MRCPCH and got registered as a specialist after working here as a fellow for 3 years.
I see.
2
So
years,
it's
yeah,
not
for 2
it's
years,
not like a
and it was-
blanket system. Like it's all case to case basis,
It is
especially the
case-to-case
specialist
basis.
part.
It is very hard. It's very confusing. I have a colleague. I have a friend who's a vascular surgeon in Malaysia
Mhm.
who cannot get a job here.
Wow.
Yes,
How
unless you want to go to the specialist pathway, but you have to start from scratch, pretty much
Yeah.
like junior surgeon.
How about MRC GP? I thought that's recognized, right? That's the in Australia?
Okay, so MRC GP is a bit of a loophole that I don't know whether. I actually don't know much about it, but I think that loophole is not very true.
Yeah, so like there's a lot of this specializing thing like GP. The only good thing about it is if you go and work in Western Australia, where they really need doctors. This is rural Western Australia. We're not talking about Perth. We're talking about outside of that, very far off from everywhere, where they need doctor services. No one wants to go and work in these places. But if you go and work there as a doctor with MRC GP, they will easily, you write to the college, they will give you because they need your services in this area. So if you are willing to do that, fair enough, you will get it recognized. And so there's all these MRCPs. If you go and work in a rural setup, of course a vascular surgeon can't go and work in this rural setting because he can't do vascular surgery there. So he can't get a job. So they're picking that way. And every has their own rule. So which is hard. So we don't know
Every
where.
state, every state in Australia works differently. We can only say for South Australia because we've only been in South Australia, but every state in Australia will have a very different system and how they pay the doctors, to how they employ, to how they select, and how they register. It's very different. Unfortunately, we can't give you a blanket rule for everyone.
I see.
And then we talk about rural, we're not talking about like Muar or Jasin. We're talking about worse than that. Like you don't even see a single soul at night. Kind of rural, like it's quiet.
Yeah,
you probably see more kangaroos running around than people. So that kind of rural.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, I think I was just going to talk about like one of my colleagues who she did post-graduation with me. She did her MRC COG from UK and then MRC GP, and now she's in Sydney doing GP with special interest in obs-gyn.
Yeah, you can do that. Yes.
So I that's how I know that MRC GP is, I think, recognized. So
yes, MRC GP is a loophole, but it's also case by case basis, and you definitely need a lot of experience and credentials for them to actually take you in.
Right. So I guess like the question, Sunari has to, I think, check on that more, do research on that to find out, because different places have different rules in Australia.
Yeah.
For another question, for work-based assessment, we have to pay to get into hospital.
Yeah, so you don't have to pay to get into hospital. You get employed by the hospital, and then you pay the hospital back. So technically, you have a job. You're employed as a doctor, and then they will send you a bill. Okay, this is part 1. This is $3,000, and then you have to pay. And then at the end of the part 1, they'll give you, this is my second part 2, $6,500. So you're employed, you're being paid as to work, but then you have to pay them back,
right,
for a course that you're doing.
Yeah, so that means you can earn the salary and pay them back as well, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good option then.
Easily, because technically the whole work-based assessment is $10,000, but your minimum pay as a doctor jet will be $80,000. And then on top of that, you can claim at least half of it through your tax or your personal development fund.
I see.
Yeah.
Right. So if another question is there, since it's there, I'll just read that out first. If one is a psychiatrist in Malaysia via parallel pathway, that is MRC Psych, is it MRC Psych, is it recognized in Australia?
For what I know, I don't know, but I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah. But don't think that you can't come into the country just because you got MRC Psych. It just means that you get into the training program into Psych really quickly. If you come to the country with AMC Part 1, Part 2, you will get into the training really quickly. Like they will happily take you in because you already have some kind of background of psychiatry before you even start in their program. So it's actually a boost to get you into the college itself here. But I just don't know where we stand with like some of these MRT.
Yeah, with the para pathway, they don't usually do very well with para pathways. But if you have MRC site or something like that, and you have AMC Part 1, then yes, you definitely get in quite easily. So it's the AMC Part 1 that is the most important bit. You need to pass your AMC Part 1 because that's literally the stepping stone for the whole pathway. Even if you have AMC Part 1 and you are a specialist, you can get into AMC, get your foot into Australia, work there first, and then ask for specialist recognition for your specialist pathway. Then you can use the other pathway up. You don't have to do it. You might get lucky and not do your Part 2 or work-based assessment at all. But AMC Part 1 is probably the most
definitely needed.
Yeah, definitely needed.
Right. So you mentioned about the online exam, like practicing, like some websites where you actually like log in or subscribe and practice.
Yeah.
So is it possible for us?
We can gather the ones that we use, and we can I guess email to Prof. And then
Okay, sure. You can email to Prof. and then me, and then I can share it with the
others.
Yeah, and especially when I get it recorded, I'll try to add on those links as well to make it more worthwhile. Right. Now now the questions are coming. We were supposed to wind up by 7. What kind of, but it's okay. I mean, I'm happy that the questions are coming in actually, because these are like quite a few questions that will go unanswered. What kind of general cases do we see or seen mostly in hospitals? What kind of cases do you see mainly there? Like
everything and anything, because you work in the ED now. But
we
it's
work in
different.
It's I would say something that's different from Malaysian standards would be mental health.
It's like, because drug is a big issue in Australia. You've got ice addicts, heroin addicts, GHB addicts. They all come in with different medical problems.
Yeah, so I guess like from the ED point of view, you get to see all the varieties. Like,
but it's also in the internal departments too. So mental health, I don't think you have a lot of drug issues in Malaysia in comparison to here. So psychiatrists will see a lot of these patients. Drug-induced psychosis is very common in Australia. Yeah. But psychiatrist is in demand. So if you've got psychiatry, MRC psych, you're ever welcome to Australia. It's the most in demand at the moment, psychiatry.
Yeah. Right. Shalini, I would try to see, like, I'll ask them if they're sharing. It's okay. I will put those numbers in the recording that I put in, so you can directly communicate with Priya and Tom.
Happy for you guys.
Yeah. Right. I think I have one more question which I held up here. Like, this was about cost of living, salary, how's the workload in the hospital. It's like a few questions. I'm just like, mashing them up. Cost of living, salary, workload in the hospital.
Well, Priya owns a house now. So cost of living is so it's pretty much the, how do I say, it's cheaper than Malaysia, dollar to dollar.
I see.
So you can spend.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Grocery shopping, dollar to dollar. Don't convert. Please do not convert.
Okay.
Dollar to dollar, you can spend about 50 to 100 Australian dollars for grocery shopping for a week. That gives you amazing food. That includes a steak and like beautiful food. If you go cheaper, $50 itself you can get, if you're vegan, $50 you get beautiful vegetarian food under $50 for a week. If you eat out, it's expensive. Eating out in Australia is expensive.
But so is eating out in Malaysia right now. I came back in August, everything is expensive. Yeah.
I think Malaysia is definitely picking up. But then the value for money is definitely better in Australia. Value for money, you see the dollars, you see the money bigger. The $1 or the $2 get you more things than RM1 and RM2 in Malaysia. I mean, you literally walk in Malaysia and have RM2 and you get nothing out of it. But here, $2, I can still get something out of it. And then pay-wise, junior doctors will usually start off at about $80,000 to $85,000 per annum. which is after tax deduction, yada yada yada, paperwork, financial. You get, so in Australia you get paid every 2 weeks. So it's a fortnightly pay. It's not monthly. It took me some time to get used to it. But it's fortnightly, so every 2 weeks they pay you.
Wow.
And every 2 weeks at the junior doctors they pay you about 2,005 to 2,005 every fortnight. So in a month you get, if you're hardworking and you end up doing a lot of overtime, you get about 5,000 Australian dollars a month. If you convert, it's 15,000 ringgit. Don't convert, but you're not spending that money there. And the best part in Australia is you get paid for every minute you work for extra. So if I get home and I leave work at, supposed to finish at 6 o'clock, I leave at 6:15. I write 6:15 and I get paid for my 15 minutes.
Wow.
Yes.
That's okay. I was going to ask how to get in OBG there.
And if your boss asks you, even if you don't write it, you like, if you're very shy, very malu, like,
Yeah, the bosses will remind you.
You're like, it's okay, it's only half an hour. It's okay. Your boss will come to you and say that you work more than this time, I am paying you. So don't worry about that bit.
Wow.
So that, I think for us, when we first came in, we were very shy. We didn't want to claim extra hours.
Yeah.
But they're like, please claim, and they will tell you to claim, and they will expect you to claim, and they will sign it for you, and they'll pay you. Don't worry about that. That's the good part about Australia. You work and you get paid. Working hours in Australia is 76 full time. So 76
In a fortnight, not in a week.
fortnight.
In a fortnight,
Wow.
yes.
Hours, 76 hours in 2 weeks, you know.
Yeah.
So me and Priya, we work only 8 days in 2 weeks.
I think, wow, no.
But we work hard. Like, to be honest
You
with
work
you,
hard,
the
don't you?
10
You work hard.
hours,
You
you're
work hard.
actually running around doing work. So you're putting in effort. It's not like you're not. It's just the timing is a lot. You go home and you're actually sleeping.
Yeah,
Unlike
I mean,
36
the-
hours in
we
Malaysia.
We won't be Mamak store having coffee and tea. There's no Mamak store having coffee and tea or having 1 hour lunch break or whatsoever. It's only half an
Yeah.
hour lunch break. But we do only 8 shifts a fortnight because we do shift work, because we're both emergency. So we do 8 shifts a fortnight, half an hour break each shift. So you do 9.5 hours every shift, and then you get 6 days off. So it's
Lovely.
actually really good. And obviously if for instance I work 9 days a fortnight, so my extra 1 day is an overtime pay. My extra 1 day is not normal pay, it's an overtime pay. So
And if you work on
it all
public
comes down
holidays,
to-
you get additional day off. Yes.
it all comes to- yeah,
You've got
it
a
all
lot of
comes-
perks.
I think I'm going to get a lot of queries on Australia now after you guys, like, you know,
So
painted
also
it.
if you come in, especially for people who are single parents with kids who have to struggle bringing up kids alone, if they move with the kids without the spouse for any reason at all, the government actually supports the finances additional. They pay you per fortnight a certain amount to support extra. So you've got a lot of additional help if you need. As long as you put it in paper and you give it to them, they'll pay you funding every 2 weeks and stuff. So it's not like you are struggling with you consider 80K compared to earning in Malaysia after 3-4 years is like a lot of difference. But Malaysian currency doesn't bring you anywhere in Malaysia.
Yeah.
Right. So I guess, like, you know, because our time's up, so what we can think of looking forward is that maybe when you guys come here in Malaysia, we can actually try to organize something with regards to the part 1 and course or something like that. You can share the questions and how to approach those things, that we can have a short 1 day something that would definitely benefit many of our students or graduates. We can try to organize that. I'll keep in touch with you on this as well as the other things.
Yeah.
And like, I think we have to end now. It's almost 7 o'clock. So thank you very much.